Well, we got to investigate this. It's like a perfect line right down the lake.
Doug Woods, a renowned TV host, is in the final preparations for a new adventure that will be the theme of his show, Surviving in the Wild. He receives from his daughter, a charming young girl, a phone playing a heartfelt video made by her and her mother. With his heart warmed by family affection, Doug heads to the van where his teammates await him. Always in good spirits, they joke about Doug's upcoming adventure in a wild forest, which promises to be more challenging than ever. During the trip, Doug suggests a game of chess to pass the time, an idea accepted by his brother Terry, the group's cameraman. On the road, the conversations revolve around survival techniques and filming. Terry reminds Doug of the importance of keeping the lenses clean, while the director, Bill, examines the map, pointing out key filming locations, including a hunting camp frequented by the local guide. The teammates encourage Doug to surpass himself, as the success of this expedition could catapult the show's audience to new heights. The team stops at a quaint roadside diner, where they meet Duncan, the guide, who is waiting for them. With rustic honesty, Duncan admits he has never watched the show but guarantees he knows the region like no one else. He warns the group about the area's risks, mentioning that in case of an accident, a bear might find someone before the rescue teams do. After their conversation, they board Duncan's boat, and Bill gives Doug a final reminder. He will have to survive in the forest for 5 days, filming every detail of his experience. Disembarking on a secluded beach, Doug finds himself alone with his backpack, unaware of its contents, a true test of survival. He begins the show by explaining that, according to the plot, he is a photographer lost in the vastness of northern Canada. After unpacking the items, among them a hat, a camera, an energy drink, an apple, a pocket knife, and gum, Doug starts setting up his camp. A small accident with a branch results in a cut on his finger, but he cleans the blood in the river's cold water without much concern. As the sun sets, Doug uses an empty energy drink can and polishes its bottom to try to make fire, a meticulous process that requires patience and precision. The technique works, and he celebrates small victories in front of the camera. At the end of the day, in satellite contact, Bill reports the team's success in catching trout. Feeling hungry, Doug humorously replies that his imminent success will make him famous in several nations. Before retreating to the rustic shelter he built, he reassures everyone of his safety and disconnects, ready to face the night in the forest. In the dead of night, a loud noise cuts through the silence, accompanied by tremors shaking the ground beneath Doug's tent. At first, he thinks it is an earthquake, a phenomenon not uncommon in this region. At dawn, curious and somewhat apprehensive, Doug walks to the nearby lake. What he sees leaves him speechless. The opposite shore is disfigured, as if a colossal axe had sliced through the land. Intrigued and motivated by a new mystery for his show, he grabs his camera and heads over to investigate the phenomenon. As he gets closer, Doug notices something even more alarming. The water's surface is dotted with dead fish. While filming, a wolf appears out of nowhere, stopping on the opposite shore and staring directly at Doug. With adrenaline rushing, Doug backs away, watching the wolf, which strangely ignores the fish and vanishes into the dense forest. Trusting the animal's instinct, Doug decides not to eat the fish. Attempting to contact his team to report the strange events, he discovers that the satellite phone is silent. He theorizes that a meteorite impact might be interfering with communication signals. Determined to find food, Doug explores the forest and finds rabbit droppings. Reluctantly but aware of the need to survive, he explains to the camera how to set up a simple trap using sticks, a heavy stone, and an apple as bait. Returning to the lake to check his traps, Doug finds a captured rabbit. He celebrates the success, but suddenly, his camera inexplicably falls off the tripod. Doug spots another rabbit, but a sinister feeling of being watched envelops him. He scans the surroundings, but nothing unusual appears. Later, he demonstrates how to clean and prepare the rabbit. As he begins cooking, he tries once more to make contact, but to no avail. Watching again the video message from his wife, who promises a warm hug upon his return and advises him to be careful. Hello, my dear friends. This is the summary of the movie, Man vs. I hope you are enjoying it. Comment very good so we know you paid close attention to every detail in the video. Now let's continue. Doug feels watched once more. This time, he speculates it could be a bear, though he would prefer it to be a wolf, knowing that wolves usually travel in packs. Ending the day, Doug eats one of the rabbits, hanging the other in a tree to avoid attracting predators. By the crackling fire, he plays chess with himself, reflecting that the true challenge of survival goes beyond the physical. In the dark expanse of the forest, a noise breaks the silence, causing a momentary tension in Doug. He listens intently, but the sound does not repeat, so he calms down and returns to his solitary chess game. Distracted by the board, Doug does not notice that the rabbit hanging in the tree is being subtly taken away. Moments later, he decides to record another message for his viewers, describing the comforting feeling of his jungle refuge. The tranquility is interrupted by another mysterious scream. Quickly, he grabs the night vision camera and scans the surroundings of his shelter. The forest, however, remains empty. When he hears a branch snap behind him, Doug turns around only to see the vegetation swaying, no visible presence. Intrigued and uneasy, he returns to the fire, unable to sleep. At dawn, cold and exhausted, he vents to the camera about the hardships he has faced, feeling his physical discomfort sharpen his discontent with the situation. But remembering the importance of maintaining professionalism for the program, he regains his composure and begins the third day in the Canadian wilderness. Hopeful for a hot breakfast, he searches for the rabbit and discovers that the rope was broken and the animal is gone. Frustrated, he tries once again to contact his team, but without success. Convinced that a cunning wolf might be behind the disappearance, he checks the other traps but finds the first one empty and the second one showing no sign of the expected rabbit. At the sight of the second trap, however, he discovers a black, unknown substance, deepening the mystery. Back at camp, Doug notices that his phone is also missing. He remembers leaving it in his backpack, but upon checking, he notices something even more disturbing. The chess pieces have been moved. The unsettling possibility of losing his sanity haunts him, but the alteration of the game suggests the presence of someone with intellectual abilities, something beyond the capabilities of a wild animal. At night, reflecting on the strategic moves on the chessboard, Doug admits it was a smart play. He knows his colleagues couldn't have done it since they don't play chess. The situation requires him to rethink his next steps. When morning comes, he records a cautious message for Terry, which might need editing. His instincts advise him to leave the area quickly. Doug feels capable of facing bears or crocodiles, but the idea of a potential psychopath lurking is too much for him. Deciding to relocate to a cliff, he takes the opportunity to film additional scenes. Doug encourages his audience to imagine themselves lost in a vast forest, assuming a rescue team is already searching for them. Still, he suggests proactively finding an open area to facilitate discovery. Determined, Doug heads toward a cliff offering a wide view of a lake below, ideal for being seen from a distance. Although he needs supplies, a quick check reveals the lake is devoid of fish. He then returns to the forest in search of food, and to his surprise, finds a recent fire pit surrounded by stones, with his own pot suspended above the flames. This, along with the discovery of his dismantled phones, confirms his suspicions that he is not alone and that his unwanted companion might be dangerous. While investigating the area, Doug stumbles and falls, discovering as he gets up a macabre animal graveyard, brutally mutilated. He hides under a large rock, realizing he is facing a massive trap built on the same principles he had demonstrated for catching small animals. He films the horrifying scene and runs desperately to the cliff, where he catches his breath. Upon checking the chessboard, he notices that the pieces have been moved again. With the camera in hand, he challenges the psychopath to reveal themselves, but only silence responds. That night, Doug positions 3 cameras with strategic views, hoping to capture the mysterious intruder in action. Exhausted and hungry, he tries to rest. One dawn passes uneventfully, but in the morning, Doug discovers that the cameras have been sabotaged. Feeling defeated and fearing for his life, Doug decides to abandon the show. He records a farewell video, explaining that he used pine cones in the fire to create a smoke signal to guide his team to rescue him. Suddenly, an overwhelming terror grips him, and an invisible force throws him into the lake. Desperate, Doug swims to the shore and in a panic, runs into the forest, constantly looking over his shoulder. Abruptly, he trips and falls into a deep hole, catching sight of a figure lurking above before losing consciousness. Upon regaining consciousness, Doug examines himself and, relieved, finds he only has bruises. Using the stones lining the hole for support, he climbs to the surface. Exhausted but still determined, he finally reaches his colleague's camp, only to find the tents abandoned and bloodstains on the trees. Horrified, he sees Terry hanging from a tree and rushes to help him, fearing the worst. Terry was barely alive, unable to utter a word. In despair, Doug runs to the tent to access the emergency radio, but the equipment is completely destroyed. Without wasting more time, he grabs a first aid kit and, upon returning to Terry's side, finds a horrid figure hunched over his brother. The creature, noticing Doug's presence, lets out a deafening and disorienting sound. Doug takes refuge under a rocky ledge. He can hear the creature's heavy breathing above him. In an act of cunning and desperation, Doug scatters a handful of chess pieces on the ground, drawing the monster's attention, and then runs in the opposite direction. The creature furiously chases him. Reaching the stone pit where he had fallen earlier, Doug turns at the last second, pulls out his camera with a flash, and triggers an intense light, temporarily blinding the being. Disoriented, the monster stumbles and falls into the pit. Doug, without hesitation, pushes a heavy rock, striking the creature on the head. Back at the camp, Doug discovers the worst-case scenario. Terry and his other colleagues are dead, their bodies brutally mutilated. He carefully lines up the bodies, covering them with a tarp, and walks to the riverbank, overwhelmed by grief. Feeling the weight of his loss, he makes one last recording, doubting anyone is still alive to watch it. He leaves a loving message for his wife and daughter, reviewing the videos he received from them for some comfort. After tending to his own injuries, Doug consults a map and discovers the nearest hunting camp is 20 kilometers away. He begins a long, solitary trek. Upon arriving at Duncan's cabin, he finds the place abandoned, but a television is still on. When he turns it on, the news reveals an even darker truth. Earth is being invaded by alien ships, and cities are being devastated. Doug quickly stocks up on canned food and heads to the boat, determined to return to his family. Then Duncan appears, armed, but before they can leave, the alien Doug had overcome resurfaces and attacks Duncan, killing him instantly. In a reflexive act of survival, Doug uses the boat's propeller to shred the alien, whose remains vanish into the river's murky waters. Exhausted, Doug lifts the anchor and starts the engine. In the sky, he observes countless glowing objects descending toward Earth. And so, the film ends. If you liked this film, I recommend watching this other one here too. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. See you there.